Hello, welcome to the latest episode of the Couple of Pints Podcast. This week I'm joined by Jack Woodward. Jack's a football commentator, and for most of the last 20 years he spent it in-house at Aston Villa. He's now freelance, works for the EFL and talks sport amongst others, and he has got some fantastic stories that you're going to want to hear. Let's get into the episode, and as always, if you can subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, Instagram and TikTok, we would be so appreciative of that. Let's have a couple of pints with Jack Woodward. Jack, a couple of pints. Cheers.
Cheers, Nick. Great to see you. Thanks for inviting me.
So, Jack Woodward, football commentator, pundit, pre-match show presenter.
Yeah, those pre-match shows were quite difficult the season Villa got relegated.
I can't imagine there's been a lot of
Froggy were sat there trying to bang the drum, which, you know, this pint glass is half full, not half empty. always looking for that positive angle, part of the job. But as being the front man for the TV and radio channels that season was particularly difficult because they were on the downward curve by that point. But there were so many good seasons before that, I hasten to add.
Yes, so you're best known, as you've alluded to there, you're best known for being the voice of Aston Villa over 20 years or so. That's certainly where I know you from as a Villa fan. You also do the EFL highlights as well, we'll come to that. Football fan?
Oh, huge football fan.
Who's your team?
Growing up at school, you might tell from the accent I'm not from Birmingham originally. It was actually Sheffield Wednesday or Nottingham Forest.
Okay.
I don't know. Part of your team is very, very loyal.
The man behind the camera will be delighted to hear that.
And I chose Wednesday because that's where I'm from originally, from Worksop. And I actually went to Sheffield Uni not only to study a history degree, but also to go and watch Wednesday in the Premier League. So that was my passion. But always loved football, liked playing it, realised I was, like most people, never going to be good enough to actually have a career playing the game. So I always just liked watching it analytically. My nickname was Motty at uni. So that was what I always wanted to do. Hallam FM, the local station, ran a competition where the winner would get potentially on air to cover a game. So I was just sat there playing my, showing my age now, playing my Super Nintendo, 16-bit, something like that, Super Soccer on that, commentating just on a dictaphone, one of the old-fashioned tape players, and sent it in, didn't think anything of it, but got on the shortlist and ended up getting into the industry that way.
Right, I see. So did you always want to work in football? Was that always an ambition that you had, obviously not being a good enough player? Through another route, you wanted to be
I think the analogy I'd use is most boys, girls now as well, which is fantastic, by the way, want to score the winning goal in the cup final, don't they? I always wanted to commentate on it. That was what I wanted to do, and I have done that. Sadly, from Villa's point of view, when I've been there for the club channel, it's been the other team scoring, even though you did have Ali Samatta and you did have Milner's penalty, but sadly, in the era I was doing it, that Villa didn't end up winning one of those on one of those visits to Wembley in a final. But that's just what I always wanted to do with my life, and I just couldn't believe myself. I have to pinch myself most days when I think I am actually doing it for a living, because obviously I was always told very niche, very difficult to get into. You need a backup. I'm from a family of teachers, so that was always an option. But it's something I wouldn't necessarily have predicted. Going to work for a club specifically. It was always radio and TV I wanted to do. Radio is my first passion, but that's just how things transpired for me.
So the TFM gig, was that just on football? Was that more of a sports sort of reporter role? Or
I was on the breakfast show, and this is the sort of humour you got on the station. It was called the Serial Thrillers. with John and Anna, who are brilliant. John Foster now, who actually is the stadium announcer now at Middlesbrough, and his wife works in the media as a news correspondent as well. And Judy McCourt was there, who, if you ever watch the People's Postcode Lottery, she's one of the people. So it's funny who you keep seeing. It's a strange world, really, the media. People keep cropping up, but they were all great to work with. Had some fantastic times there. Brian Robson was the manager at Middlesbrough. He even rang me when I left to say good luck, as did Chris Turner, the Hartlepool boss, the Darlington chairman. Dave Hodgson was a real character as manager of Darlington, and that was my first commentary, because I did reports on Middlesbrough, home and away, so that was really exciting, covering Premier League football. But then they didn't do commentary like 90 minutes. They didn't have the contract for that. So obviously that's what I wanted to do. So I did all the fun stuff. We did like a few songs on the breakfast show, just had some fun, and that was great. But then I did get the chance to do a commentary, because Darlington and Hartlepool, two of the local teams, played each other in the old, I don't know if it was called, it wasn't called League Two then, it would have been the old 3rd Division or 4th Division, and they were in a semi-final. And so here I was, again, rather like that game I told you about, Exeter Donny Rose for LMFM. This was the first 90-minute live I'd done, so it wasn't. I did reams of notes, had everything prepared.
Do you remember your intro from that?
I'm not sure I remember my intro. I won't bore you with the full 90 minutes, but anyway. But the big thing was, I've got 2 World Cup players I'm doing it with. I've got Peter Beardsley on my right, who probably needs no introduction to football fans. Legendary player for club and for England, of course. He finished his career as a Hartlepool player. That's why he was there. And then Jim Platt, who played in a World Cup for Northern Ireland as a keeper, had the managerial links with Darlington. So I'm sat there in between them, thinking, God, how am I going to do this? And that was probably one of the most nervous I've ever been, because until you actually do something, you don't know whether you're going to be capable. As it is, it just felt great. It flowed. Managed to bring them in. That my old boss said, Jack, at times I thought he swallowed the dictionary a little bit there, because I'm using words like ubiquitous, and he was all over, and indefatigable. I think I got in there, but you don't need to do that. It's nice to have it up your sleeve, but it's about getting the passion across. And there was so much build up to that game, because there were 2 of our teams, and it was great. Darlington actually ended up winning that over 2 legs, and the guy doing the second leg was Keith Houchin, who scored a winning goal in the cup final for Coventry. But he was obviously Hartlepool. So Beardsley, I don't think we could afford him for both games. So Houchin did the second leg. Darlington went through, and they lost to Barry Fry's Peterborough in the final at Wembley. So we did the Wembley on a Friday night. Obviously wasn't full because of the fan bases, but that was great. But from that point on, I knew what I wanted to do then. So although that was probably the best job I've ever had. Wasn't that well paid, but it was in radio. It was on a station that had a good listenership in the area, and I could have stayed for years and enjoyed it. But because I wanted to commentate, the boss, I remember saying, he used a really cheesy line. He said something like, Jack, I feel like the Pope here, but you go in my blessing. Because he basically meant, that's what you want to do. So I'd seen an advert, Can You Paint Pictures with Words, was the advert from BRMB, Capital Gold, and I ended up getting, that's why I came to Birmingham.
You moved to the Midlands.
Has said that and enjoyed that. So and he's someone I interviewed in Hong Kong as well for the Barclays Asia Trophy. Do you remember that?
I do vaguely remember. Was it a 7-a-side trophy?
No. The 6-a-side youngsters did play every year, but that was the pre-season. I think Alex McLeish might have been manager. Tails came over as an ambassador, and we had a great time on that trip. It was very hot. Pre-season, and Martin was over there, and again such a nice fella. And a doyen of commentary, someone I looked up to, and it's so good, isn't it? They say you shouldn't meet your heroes, but I in a way through this job I've met all of them, because I interviewed Ian Botham when he was it was before the Cricket World Cup, when I worked at TFM, just to ask him about that, because obviously he played for Durham, and he's got links there, and the other one, Michael Johnson, I loved him, the runner, and obviously became a good pundit. He was at Bodymore, sitting in reception. I thought, what is going on here? But he'd arranged to meet Martin O'Neill to ask him about the fitness facilities.
No way.
I think Martin made him wait a few hours. I'm thinking, what are you doing? Well, I had to wait all day for him once. It was nothing personal, it was just his timekeeping. But yeah, and Martin came out and he said, Michael, I hope you're ready for this. Jack's going to want to know what you did in the 4th second of that 200-metre run and all the detail. But yeah, so met him and have managed to meet. And the other one is Des Lynam, who is a Brighton fan. So Villa played Brighton in a cup game, and there he was, and had a chance to.
Des Lynam's famous line for the World Cup, wasn't it? Shouldn't you be at work?
Shouldn't you be at work? Yeah,
that's the one. It's a little bit before my time, but it's one that I always think of.
He also said, I think he said something like, I think there was a game. Was it the semi-final in Italia 90 before your time?
Yeah, it would be.
But I think it was on BBC and ITV. And so to promote it after England won the quarter-final, he said, I hope you'll watch it on the BBC, folks. Frankly, if you didn't, I'd be disappointed. I got the impression of millions of people watching that just so they didn't offend Des. But again, he was, what I expected, which is really, really nice. When that happens.
So you've sort of like...
But I'm not normally nervous when I do an interview, actually. But for those ones, I probably was.
Yeah.
Whereas when it's with a high-profile player who I don't know necessarily, I won't be nervous. So.
Yeah, because you're not really caring about what their opinion is of you.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think for me, with commentary lines, a line that really sticks with me is when Villa won the playoff final, and it was Daniel Mann, and I was at that game. I was at the game, but I must have watched it back about 100 times. Yeah. And just as the full-time whistle goes, his commentary line was, "The fallen giants are back on their feet."
Yeah.
And that line is now synonymous in my mind with the moment, even though I was there. And I think that's the art of good commentary, is even when you're at a game and you've got nothing at all other than the atmosphere, to create something like that. I mean, but in my head, I'm seeing Daniel Mann writing that line for every one of the 4 clubs that he, like a different line, obviously, for every one of the 4 clubs. At full time, what do I say? Is that something that commentators do? Do they have a line, like a sort of, if Villa win this game, I'm going to say this at full time?
I know Daniel, actually, but I've not seen him for a while, but I'll pass that on to him. I'm sure he'll appreciate it.
I'm sure he'd come on.
I'm sure he would do. Very good commentator and a nice fella. But I think my one of my bosses, I've had quite a few actually at Villa over the years, but Phil Mepham, he was the first press officer really at the club, brought in by Doug, and he said to me, what you've got to remember is the best ad-libs are rehearsed. And I sort of know what he means. He might have been saying it tongue-in-cheek. He knows where he worked for ITV, he got a very high standard and was a good person to work for and with. So sometimes there is a skill to making it sound like it's genuine, isn't it? You can have it written there, and often when I've done matches for TalkSport or Final Score and whatever, I've done it and I've had to, I've scripted something because I've had time to. There's not much happening in the game. You've got to make it sound like it is. But I think really it comes back to your point about the emotion of it. Sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And I think I said something like when Villa played Ajax, Martin Lauwersen scored, and I said something like, he likes the claret and blue touch paper, and that just worked because it was just at the time, and I didn't have it scripted down, but it might be something I had thought about on the long journeys you make to home and away, and it just worked for that game, which was probably one of my favourites under the lights at Villa Park, and Blackburn as well when they beat them 6-4. That was one of my favourites. So I'm not sure I've answered your question specifically because I can't speak for every commentator.
Of course.
And I've had a few that I'm happy with, but like Juan Pablo, some of his goals, I think I just said something like, there are no words to describe that goal, which you need to find. I'd say something like there are no superlatives, or when he scored against Chelsea in a League Cup quarter-final. That was one of my favourite goals. But it's nice to have it, but I do think the best lines are when you haven't thought about it, and it's just organic, and it just comes from the theatre of the moment, because football is drama, it's theatre, and it's emotion.
Well,
and that's why I think I do get on with fans like you and people who say, are you a Villa fan? And they're surprised when you say, well, no, I wasn't born a Villa fan, as I said. But I take that as a compliment because you've actually managed to inject that passion into the broadcast or into how you talk about it. And obviously, in a way, I became one because I lived and breathed it for so long, and it meant so much because it was a job that I dreamed about doing.
I thought you were a Villa fan, and I'll tell you why in a bit.
Right,
there's a bit.
Oh well, I have got some burning out. My granddad was a Villa fan, and my dad is a baggy.
So obviously, you became the voice of the Villa in 2003, was it? I think.
Well, I mean, it was. I was at BRMB Capital Goals, as I say. Yep. Then I left after the most of one season, freelanced for a while. Yep. Went back to Radio Sheffield, did a few channels, and then because of that, because I was known to Villa fans, even at that point, only having done a few months. Yep. Then the people who launched the radio stations at the various clubs identified me as someone they would want to work on the Villa one. Love music, live football, or it might have been live music, love football. That was the strap line. I remember because we got Juan Pablo Angel to read it out, and it was helping his English at the time. That was how it started. But I wasn't employed by the club. It was a joint venture with, and I think it was on Sky Digital. But you were watching a screen to listen to the radio, if you see what I mean. Yeah. So it's before. I think people followed the commentaries because we put them on the website as well. But the rest of it. So it's a shame it wasn't on an FM at the time. So I think the fans would have really bought into it. But there were good signs, and that's where it started. And then I became employed officially by the club in mid 2003, I think it was. Yeah. The best years I had were down probably. Certainly helped the fact that I got on particularly well with Martin O'Neill and particularly well with Paul Faulkner, who was the chief exec. So that enabled me over a pretty much a 10-year period to really get into the detail of the club and to be a crucial part of it, a link between the club and the fans. And
when it was needed.
Probably was. So
when you came into the club, obviously the club was owned by Doug Ellis. Manager was who was the manager at the time?
It depends when you define. When the Villa Radio started, it was John Gregory,
right?
And they just had that good start, hadn't they? To the season, they were top of the league, and I think it's around the time when Schmeichel scored the goal. They did lose that game, but they were top. And then he left, and then Graham Taylor came back and had a year, and then it was basically when I really started properly to be employed by the club. It was O'Leary,
David O'Leary.
Yeah, O'Leary.
Right. Okay. So how many managers have you done?
Oh, I haven't counted up.
Must be into double figures.
I can probably name them all, but I mean, Doug Ellis. Everyone's got a story about him, but I even went to his house on his 90th birthday, and interviewed him, and I asked him, Sir Doug, how would you sum up Aston Villa and what it means to you? And he just said, well, it's my life. And it was quite touching, actually. And he was still wearing his Villa tracksuit. And in the early years, it was a very different world we lived in then. He had a tight reign over everything, and I mean everything. Expenses, for instance. He called me once when he was with all the hierarchy and said, Jack Woodward, what were you doing at Portsmouth? Well, I was doing my job. I was commentating the game. I was getting the interviews. He goes, "Oh right, I've been writing checks out for you every week. It's too much. The radio station's hemorrhaging cash. I might have to close it down. Okay." But listen, that was purely him thinking with his financial hat on, and he loved the club. He cared about the club, and he valued loyalty. And I thought he was great, a real character. Some people thought he was full of his own importance, but he was a character, and the game needs characters.
Yeah, you bring me on to something interesting actually about Doug Ellis, which is something I heard on another podcast, and it was Peter Crouch. I'm not sure if this is any truth in it whatsoever, or whether you've heard of it at all, but Peter Crouch claims that Doug Ellis once said to him that he invented the overhead kick.
I think it might have been in a game against Italian prisoners of war, possibly. The bicycle kick, he called it, but he probably claims a few other things as well.
I think with any football club fan base, being a manager and getting the fans on side, obviously, particularly, Villa is a weird one because, from my perspective, there's only 3 managers of the last 10 years really, and that excludes the current manager, Unai, because it's too early to say, and I think he will get the fans on board, there's no doubts in my mind. But the 3 managers really that have got the fans on side at Villa are Martin O'Neill, and obviously the way that ended wasn't fantastic in terms of endearing himself to the fan base, but that's football. Tim Sherwood, he almost certainly had the backing of the fans, and then obviously Dino. From your perspective, how important was that sort of connection between management and fan base, and how could you see that yourself?
I think
because you've seen it unravel as well.
Yeah, I have. And what was interesting is I'd done the standard interviews with Martin for a few months in the first season, and he did a press conference. I think it was around Easter time, and Villa were not by any means in the relegation zone. They were probably mid-table, but a few of the journalists were looking at it and saying, "Oh, Martin, couple of games over Easter. If you lose that, you're looking over your shoulders. You could be in serious danger here. And you've not, that would be difficult for you, wouldn't it, in your first season?" And he wasn't happy. I don't think he was happy. We wouldn't have been happy with that tone of questioning. But we always used to interview him, preferably before, but sometimes after the press conference. So after that press conference, I interviewed him in the Paddy's, his analyst's room with all the VHSs in the background. That's how long ago it was, of the other teams. And I said to him with my club hat on, my claret and blue tinted spectacles, Martin, Easter, you win a couple of games, you're right in something, you could be in that top half, you really and there was a little pause, and he started to grin, and he goes, "Jack, that's why I love being interviewed by you, you're always so positive." And then that made me realise, well, actually, that is the value of it. But actually what I'm doing is there's more of a skill to it when the team aren't doing so well, actually. When they're doing well, it's easy. Everyone's buzzing, everyone's got a spring in their step, there's a collective smile on the faces of the staff and the fans and everyone. But then when they're not doing so well, it's about finding that line, and then they obviously remember that, and it becomes easier because you can build that bond. But then obviously you might come onto this. You need the credibility with the fans. And so for instance, when the team are doing badly, David didn't help himself, O'Leary, when he's talking about after a 5-0 defeat to Arsenal, and he's saying, Thierry Henry, we can't compete with. He's a Rolls Royce of a footballer. We can't compete with that. And I'm not sure the fan. He's genuinely saying, and we all thought, what a player. But then when you're on a club channel, you want to show that awareness. But that's not a criticism of David. But he said that because he's been asked the question, and that's his view. And obviously had the link to Arsenal. But you've got to get over the disappointment of the fans. But equally, though, I wasn't able to ask questions that fans really want to ask, because you're doing it for the fans, but also you're doing it for the club. So that's what people sometimes forget. You're doing it for the owners. They're paying you. They're paying the players. And so you've got to do it with a view to getting the message across that the owners and the club hierarchy want. So you can't say, well, that wasn't good. that wasn't good enough. You've got to be, I was quite good at gauging the mood as well of the manager and just tapping into that. And with Martin, I felt I was able to put an opinion across because I knew he would share that opinion, and so he wouldn't say, and obviously after the League Cup final, when he was fuming, and he still is clearly about Vidic not being sent off. He was, and obviously that was the thing to ask about. You've got to know what's on their mind, and you have to then just let them go with it. And it's not always always good. But because then, if you we mentioned that season they went down. If you're just saying, oh yeah, but next game can get those points, get to double figures, you look a bit silly. So you need to get the disappointment across when they lose, but equally there has to be hope.
It's that fine line between delusion and realism.
Very good point.
Working for a club it's difficult.
Yes.
Because you have to tread really carefully. Like you said there, you're looking at making sure that the people above you are happy. But also, I mean, the fan base are so important to them sort of club broadcasts. And I think in this day and age, particularly because, say Villa on Match of the Day, aren't on Sky the weekend, they're not on a TV game. That first interview that you'll see with the manager is most likely going to be from the club.
Yes, yeah.
So if the tone isn't right, obviously some fans will go, oh, well, it's happy-clappy from the club. We've lost 2-1 again. It's rubbish defending. Our defenders can't defend off corners or whatever. Or if you win, it's like, oh, it's overkill. So I think that's really sort of a good point that you make there, is finding the right balance and then trying to strike it. And
also, Nick, having said that I am a positive person, and doing this job has made me more positive, because you've got to look at the bright side. Although, when I'm working externally, which I do principally now, then you can be more honest, so that's nice to be able to do that, to have both skills. Equally though, sometimes I did feel a little bit like the bad guy, because obviously when the marketing team and the partnerships team want to do something with players, I didn't want to be a killjoy, but equally had to get the point across, along, of course, with the press office people who had to make the decisions. You're not going to be able to do that, or you're best off doing it in pre-season or on the back. So I always think, because everyone starts from a blank page and everyone's on 0 points, aren't they? So you've got a few months there. That's why I've always enjoyed the pre-season tours that I've been on, because you've been able to do things a bit differently, and the fans aren't going to say, oh well, but they let that goal in. Oh, what are they doing? Why is he overdoing this marketing project when he should be working on his set pieces? But you're not going to get that in pre-season. So obviously, I always feel for people who work at the club full time if there's a heavy defeat, because I'm thinking, well, what are they going to do next week? It's going to be a really long week for them. That's why they capitalise on it, and we all leap on it when there is a good result, and that's what makes it easier. And some of the seasons we've talked about, with when they were doing well with David and with Martin, 3 successive top 6 finishes.
So I mean, from my perspective, being a Villa fan over the last 20 years, it's filled with heartache.
How can we not know grey hairs?
They're on the way. But there's certain weeks that I can recall as being particularly awful, and to this day they still stay with me. And there was one over Christmas in 2012 under Paul Lambert. They're always over Christmas. My birthday's over Christmas, and it's always ruined. It's always ruined by the Villa. But there was one in 2012 where we lost 8-0 to Chelsea pre-Christmas. We then lost 4-0
after that game.
We lost 4-0 against Tottenham at home on Boxing Day, and then
did Bale score a hat-trick?
Yes, he did. And then on my birthday, the 29th of December, we lost 3-0 to Wigan Athletic. And from your perspective, obviously that's 3 very tough match days to commentate and report on. But how on earth do you ask questions that are different at the end of every one of them games to the manager without sort of pointing the blame at him?
That's really hard. You just have to put across, again, it's that word, disappointment, even in the tone of your voice. I can't remember exactly what I said, but it will be, wow, that was a tough, and you have to be quite generic with the question. But equally, that is one of the most difficult things you can do when you're working for a club channel, because you can't just say, we used to do things with a pundit who commentated with me on the video afterwards, and you can't say Ken McNaught takes positives from an 8-0 defeat, can you? You just can't. There aren't any positives, so you just have to take your punishment, take your medicine, and move on. But the thing is that perhaps over Christmas, and obviously generally over Christmas, you tend just to cover the games because everyone's not working anyway. So you're not doing as many of these separate projects that are the requirements of the partners. So actually, you get through the game and there isn't as much to do around it, funnily enough, over the festive period. But very, very difficult indeed. And sometimes you're thinking, well, the interview does itself if they win 5-0, but such a heavy defeat. And then you do feel for the players, because what can they say? Do they apologise? Do they just say, well, it wasn't our day? Do they say, they just have to accept that that's the game we're in, And I think sometimes fans do struggle to appreciate sport is about winning and losing. You can't win every week. Not even Manchester City and Arsenal this season win every week. No. So there is, but if you're losing every week, then it becomes a problem, and that was a long old season, that 15-16. It really was.
Have there been like any sort of interviews that you've done with a manager post match, knowing there's a good chance this is the last interview this guy's going to do with the club?
I probably have. Yeah, I think there was Alex McLeish.
Yeah.
After he did. Yeah. In fairness to Alex, lovely fella, but obviously the fact he had that link with Birmingham City, he could never escape it. And they didn't go down under him, but you just knew, and that's very hard when you're speaking to him and he's talking about potentially planning and potentially changing things. You think, well, you might not be here, and I better be. You move on and you wish him very well. I have been in that position, and it's awkward, but you just got to do the job until you know. There've been moments where the club have had great potential, great excitement. I remember, you mentioned Tim Sherwood. Brilliant, got to a cup final, kept them up, had that passion. Fans really seemed to warm to him, but then it didn't work out for him in the early part of the next season. I remember when we went to the Algarve, that's the last pre-season tour I went on in the summer of 2015, and we were having a couple of drinks with Ray Wilkins one night. Great to say that. What a lovely fella. Brilliant. Everyone was made to do an initiation song. And we had that. You can do that type of thing, a bit more light-hearted. And we were hopeful, but it didn't work out. So sometimes you have the optimism. You think it's all gonna fit, and it doesn't. Well, I mean, we had things with the coaches. We went to Hamburg, and they'd already qualified, so we went to see Nigel Kennedy.
Okay.
Which was brilliant, and he is
Mad Villa fan as well.
And when he saw Martin O'Neill in the audience, he couldn't believe it. He played a brilliant version of "O Come, O Come Emmanuel" on his fiddle, and I was telling Martin that I played the cello, and he thought I was going to go up and try and do a duet with him. I couldn't fit it with my gear, and then we did a quiz that night. Because they used to do it before every away game apparently, and Martin really wanted to win. I had a couple of drinks and wasn't taking it too seriously. He took slight issue with that. So having said I got on with him well, and I claimed to be an expert on one of the topics, which was like Oscar-winning films of the 90s, and I didn't get any of the answers right. He wasn't. He used to run up and down and punch the air like he did when he celebrated a goal when they got a question right. But I think Robbo's team might have won that one, so he wasn't thrilled.
So you were dropped from the team the next week?
No, I don't think I did another quiz with him. But he was fantastic, and I like Robbo as well. Real character, and Martin and him were a great combination.
So you've, obviously you've covered the club and you've covered a lot of like youth football, the 23s.
I used to do all the reserves away.
I think I'm right in saying that you've done a lot of games with people like Kyle Walker.
Worked with Kyle.
And in terms of like the people that you've had as co-commentators that aren't necessarily ex-footballers, current footballers, who's been the one that sort of you've listened to and you've gone, he might have a chance?
Kyle was really funny because we did a youth cup game and it was between Villa and Sheffield United.
Yes.
And obviously he had the Sheffield United link, having grown up there. And he sort of cheekily waved his United scarf in the air when they scored. He was doing it tongue in cheek. I don't think he realised we were filming it. And also, he liked some of my analogies that I was using. It was a bit hot potato there with the keeper. He couldn't, and he found it hilarious. And I did it with him and Mark Albrighton. And so Kyle tried to do it himself. He tried to do an analogy where he said, because I said it was simmering along nice. It might just come to the boil. And he goes, Jack, it's a bit like you got your pasta. You put it in the pan, don't you? And it starts hard and it goes a bit soft, doesn't it? Where are you going with this guy? And then when the water's boiling, it starts to soften. Is that what you mean? I was like, well, yeah, in a way. But at least he tried. But then obviously I saw him the other day in the pundit's chair for the BBC coverage. Yes. So I'm thinking, Kyle, you have already moved on. But he has had a great career. Mark, actually, who did it people often ask me, who is the best player you've dealt with. And it's so hard to compare players because some of them are at different ends of the scale. But I would say Mark Albright would be one of the best because, brought up brilliantly by Terry and Carroll, grounded, always had time for him. We had a round of golf with him. He nearly chipped in on one of the holes over the water at the Belfry and just had a little shot. Him and Elliot Parrott. No, it was on a par 4.
I'll say he didn't lay up on the 10th.
I got a hole in one once at the Belfry on the Villa golf day.
Oh, really?
But that was expensive.
I'll bet.
That was expensive, but I did win a holiday, so it was great. But anyway, Mark, nothing was too much trouble for him. And that opened doors as well. And then when players see you cover them in the youth team, that you build a level of trust. Jack Grealish, we used to go to all these events like at the Villa allotment when he was telling us about how much he loves chilies and he likes curries and he went to watch kids train because that's what they used to do a lot. They give it to the young inexperienced player to get them some experience of just going out there in the community and being a role model. So then now he's this big star, which good luck to him.
Most expensive British transfer ever.
Yeah, he is. I got quite emotional because I was going back to the training ground after the break from the club, and there he was as the club captain, having led them to the Premier League, and he was loyal as long as he could be, and we all wish him well because you're watching him and you still see him as a Villa man, don't you?
He'll end up back at Villa. I'm almost certain of it. I'm almost certain of it. I'm really surprised. I think I can see the Ashley Young trajectory ending like Jack Grealish a little bit, where sort of he's had his moment. It's all gone great, and then at some point later on he'll end up sort of back at the club. And by the way, Ashley, what a servant he's been.
Oh, brilliant! And he was always good because he'd always do an interview, even if they lost in his first spell, particularly opposite to Gabby, who has become a pundit. I thought he was joking when I saw him in a press room. I said, Gabby, what are you going to do now? I think I might become a pundit. I said, are you serious? but then again, sometimes they avoid the media whilst they're a player. Because they have got a brain. Look at Brad Friedel. Brilliant. He was someone he'd use a cliche like, there are no easy games in the Premier League, and he'd sound like the Godfather saying it because he just had that delivery. But then we only ever got a really good piece of him when he left because he knew it could be doctored or spun. And I always said to him, "Oh, look, this is the club." But he had a brain. He knew that if I put something out there, it might get misconstrued. So often, like Chris Sutton never did anything when he was a Villa player. Look at him now; he's all over the media and he's very entertaining. Going back to John Gregory, I love JG, brilliant. He's gone out to India, hasn't he? Had success there, and he sent a nice message when I left saying, "Oh, Villa will miss the Premier League and we'll miss you as well." Even though, and he could be prickly, especially when I was fairly young, working for BRMB. If they'd lost, it could be a hard interview.
Difficult,
but that's because they're in that bubble, aren't they?
So. Obviously, the club had an awful season in 2015-16. Got through 3 managers, ended up with Eric Black seeing out the season.
I
think we were relegated quite early on in most fans.
It was mathematically done at Old Trafford, wasn't it? I remember.
First week of April, I think. If I'm not wrong, but I think it was a 1-0 loss. Rashford 1-0, I think, if I'm not wrong.
I think it was mid-April, but it was all over by then. It was
terrible. It was a terrible season. So obviously there were a lot of casualties from the club as a result of that relegation, and obviously Villa losing their status as being one of the only 7 clubs that had retained Premier League status from the start. And from your perspective, you also left the club.
I did,
I'm guessing that wasn't your choice, and sort of how did that happen?
I think, listen, it would be easy to be, to be bitter about it, but why would I be? I mean, I don't want to sound like a kid, but I had a wonderful job for so many years, and I'm grateful for that. Andy Blair, who we've not even mentioned, and he came with some great lines. Luton, the defence parted. Like the Black Sea, he used to say, I think it was the Red Sea, Andy. But anyway, he used to get his words mixed up. I said like a cacophony of noise meets the players, and he tried to say that word in every commentary and kept messing it up. But lovely fella. But the reason I'm bringing him up is he said to me, Jack, what you've got to remember is you were great for the club, but the club were great for you. And actually I thought about it and thought, well, yeah, for reasons we've said, it just fell into place. I never thought about working for a club. You know, you've got the chief exec of the club introducing you to sponsors and new players and managers as the voice of the Villa. That's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's not on a spreadsheet, by the way. That's just how it became. The job, it was almost built around my skills. So I was just grateful for that. And I'm even grateful now to go back, and with things have moved on, I accept that, to be able still to do it, because sometimes you go back and it feels like you go back to your old house and all the furniture's moved, and it's not, but you can't think, you can't let that affect you in a bad way. It's almost a good thing that you're able to see it moving on, and they still want to use your experience. But it was sad for everyone, but I didn't, because I loved it so much. And I remember Nigel Pearson, who sadly left us, talks broadcast. I got on well with Nigel. It was so tragic, that. And he said to me, I said, "Oh, Nigel, it looks like I might be moving on here. You know, this seems to be what's happening." And he said, "Oh, yeah, is that definite?" I said, "Well, it looks like it." And it was, you know, he. Just a chat with him, and we were of the same opinion that actually it had been great for so long. Just do and even those games I was doing, thinking, God, this is still a great job even now. And I didn't know I was definitely going until quite late in the season, but then it all happened very suddenly, and I was gone. And I'm thinking, crikey, how good was that? And I was in a bit of a daze and a bit of a shock, and I've never had a long period off, but obviously working for myself I think has suited me, and I'm glad to have been staff somewhere internally and also outside. I've had both, and I haven't got the security. I've not, had that for 7 years, but I was just grateful to have done it for so long. Obviously, some of the adventures I had, like the pre-season tours, that European season, we're going to Iceland, to Odense, Denmark, to some bit of Bulgaria no one's heard of. Stilion was an absolute legend everywhere. We had an electrical storm when we got there. I remember doing it with WM, Rob Gurney, who had a great time covering that game, and they won it. And then where did we go then? We went to Hamburg, and perhaps we shouldn't make a big thing of Russia because fans weren't too pleased when they saw the squad sheet. So many. Hong Kong we talked about, went to Texas. Lee Hendry's first ever commentary was with me.
Was it?
And now looking at it, I seem to launch all these broadcasters' careers. I interviewed Micah Richards when he came, and Darren Bent on Derby's TV
You've had them
channel.
all.
They can work with them all. And it's funny how the number of, we welcomed Alan Hutton and Jermaine Genus onto the pitch and put the lights when they signed together on the same day. And that, Jermaine particularly, look at him. I've managed to do the Football League highlights. I like my style doing that. And that's been on Channel 5, it's been on Quest, it's been on ITV, so it's been on, and I've worked for, I did Derby TV through someone I knew from Villa, got me in there.
Is that what it was? So obviously when you left the Villa, you've gone Villa, and you're almost like a free agent, footballer, where you've gone, right, okay, he's gone, needs a new club.
Well, that's it.
I remember, so I was at a Derby game, and I was in a box. I was in the 1884 suite, which is right next to where the media room is. And I saw you walk out of this room, and I thought, I swear that's the fella from the Villa. And I must have just walked past, I thought nothing of it, and then I've listened to something off Derby TV, because I was at uni in Derby, and my mates were Derby fans. Okay. So I've heard something, and I was like, that's definitely him. And immediately, so I thought, right, okay, he's gone to Derby, and he's doing the same job at Villa at Derby. And from your perspective, obviously, was that the same sort of role? Was it just a case of covering all the club's games, and how was that?
The man on the other side of the camera, I couldn't believe how much Derby hate Forest and vice versa. I didn't realise until I started working for them. It didn't feel the same, but equally nothing is ever going to be the same. And even what I do for Villa now will never be the same there. No. So I'm thinking, I'm not sure I want to be now seen as the voice of Derby, because that just, it won't happen. Things have moved on.
Doesn't roll off the tongue.
And apparently even in a couple of the early commentaries I was calling the Villa. And I did say that, and then what's this guy on about? But it's almost in your mind, isn't it? How many hundreds, thousands of commentaries did I do at Villa with the home and away, and also all the friendlies and reserves and youth. And so initially I did a pre-match show as well. I did it with Benty, which was great, obviously, because I knew him from Villa. and with Roy McFarlane's and certain Michael Johnson, other Michael Johnson, who had the Birmingham link. So
nice fella, actually.
Mark Edworthy, one of the best people I've worked with. He used to play for Palace and a few other clubs, and had the link with Derby. He was brilliant, lovely fella. And Shane Nicholson, who's got a really interesting story with what he's been through in his life. So I worked with them, but then I found that mainly I wanted to do commentaries for them, and I did their youth team as well. So for a while it was like that, but then I realised that actually I wanted to be part of an overall portfolio. So although, having said, as it worked out, I did do most of the first team games for 2 seasons. As for Villa, I did them for a couple of seasons and committed myself. But then even when I was doing it, I'm thinking I don't want to be turning other things down. So I want to still have that more rounded view of it, and that is how it's pretty much worked out. I was actually quite relieved though, because the second season of Derby, they ended up playing Villa in the final, and I wasn't involved. I went away. I wasn't involved because that would have been strange.
That was what I was going to say. So I made a point of this yesterday when I was doing some research. I looked at Derby's highlights on their club channels from the playoff run.
Right, okay.
And Leeds United, that 4-2 win. Yeah. Your voice was on it.
and I'm hoping you've watched that and thought he might be a Derby fan. Well, because because that was huge for them. Because they've got a rivalry with Leeds as well to beat them.
So I watched that thinking that the commentary is very much like it's passionate, it's really good.
Yeah.
But then I looked at the same club stuff for the playoff final, and I noticed you weren't on it. And straight away I texted George and I said, I think he's a Villa fan. Because he didn't want to be sort of involved.
Well, it's interesting. I wasn't actually asked either, so they probably knew. So that doesn't matter. I'm not this. I don't mind. I was relieved because that would have been hard. You've got to be professional. I did. There was a game that season, or maybe I don't know whether it was that season. Villa won. Was it 3-0?
3-0.
Yeah, and obviously at Derby, I didn't do the game at Villa, but I did the game at Derby. And obviously it was weird because I'm thinking, God, I used to be with these away fans, and they're ripping Derby apart here. So it did, in a way, it brought good memories. But then you've just got to be professional. I was doing it for Rams TV, but obviously I am a fan in a way, aren't I?
Yeah,
I am. I can't lie. I know you don't check, but I'm not any less a Wednesday fan, am I?
Yeah, you can't change your club, but
just the way my life panned out.
If you're that ingrained in a club like you are there with Villa, it's got to be hard to not have feelings for the club on an emotional spectrum, because that's it's what you've done for 20 years.
Of course, I don't know how many stag do's have I missed. I mean, I've been to plenty of weddings. I've been best man at a couple, and don't get me wrong, I've had a good life. But you make sacrifices. I'm always working now, particularly. I'm always working when everyone else is enjoying themselves. Thankfully, it's enjoyable work. So now I do events. So I host awards and things like that, and ex-players things that I used to do at Villa. I was tight with the even last month I did an event, a black tie dinner, and I saw people who worked in the marketing and in the events and partnerships, and it was great because you've used that then afterwards. But and that going back to your previous question about how hard was it to leave and what did you think, that made it harder because you can care too much, can't you? And then when there is a void, there's a natural void because you're not you've got the freedom, which is great, and sometimes I think I almost did care too much because I did so much. I mean, awards dinners now, you can earn big money from hosting them. I just did it as part of my job. Yeah. And I did the announcing. Hey, I wanted to do it, but I was doing the announcing, I was doing interviews with fans, then I was going up to commentate. And so that was a real strain on the voice. I had to have vocal therapy.
Oh, really?
The season they were in Europe, doing all the games and everything, it was just too much. So you can do so. I think that goes back to Andy Blair's comment that the club were good for me and I was good for them. But then obviously when it is taken away, it's like, oh, all right, what do I do now? But that's why going back is good, because at least you brings back the memories, but also you're able to inject that passion back into it when it doesn't necessarily need. I think so, because it ends up just consuming it.
Yeah. So how did so obviously a couple of years at Derby, the EFL highlights, was there anything else commentary-wise in between?
Yeah, I worked for IRN, I worked for Radio Sheffield, I did things for Viking Radio, TalkSport. Yeah, I did quite a few. Went to various places because people used to say if I was ever anywhere else when I was at Villa, saying, "Well, what are you doing here?" I am able to do other things, but now it's not seen like that, which is good.
Almost like an accessory.
I think so. And obviously, I've done a lot of events things as well. I've done some cricketers things where I've done the commentary of them playing a club team over the tannoy, and I've done awards in Birmingham and in other venues as well. But IMG I've got involved with, who are a company who produce the highlight shows, but also do commentaries with clubs. And there's some Villa use, actually, a company Villa use, which is local, who do other commentaries on various live streams, because there's so many. Now I got in a fairly unusual way, but that was the way to get experience in radio, and a lot of commentators of my era, maybe a bit older, that's how they got into it. Whereas now, I would say there's so many courses, it's competitive, but also there's opportunities, club media, so that's where a lot of youngsters go into, and that's why I think me being there for so long, it was never going to be forever, was it? And I probably foolishly hadn't realised how fragile it was. Because even though I was well known to the fans, and as I say, I had those good relationships with the hierarchy of the club, it only took someone new to come in, or just a fresh pair of eyes, and it was nothing personal to me, was it? But it was just, well, we're going to do our own thing. So I didn't realise, and because it can just all get taken away. I don't get the violins out, but I never saw it like that.
Nigel Kennedy's on as well.
Because it was great when he wore his Villa top, wasn't it, on last night at the Proms? But I met some quite good celebrity fans, but I missed out on Hanks because I flew back from that trip. I went to Philadelphia. We had a great time there, but then I flew back to be at my sister's wedding. So
so you've got your sister to blame.
I've got her to blame for not meeting Tom Hanks. Well, I don't know. I don't mind. It was never something. He's well known, isn't it? I love his films, but it was for Lucy to do that, and she did a brilliant job. But it's one of those where met so many interesting people. Players, managers mainly, but fans.
Who was your favourite non-football person that you met when you were covering the
that is a really hard,
because there's a lot of people associated with the club, obviously.
It's football person.
It's got a fairly big reach in it, but you've got random.
That is really, really hard. I mean, I haven't really mentioned some of the staff, who obviously they're a crucial part of it. Sometimes it's people, I met, I quite liked the guy who was in Harry Potter, Oliver Phelps.
He was one of the brothers.
One of the Weasley brothers. He loves his Villa. We did, I think, a piece in the home changing room, and he was great. And obviously there was the actor David Bradley. He did that brilliant video.
That's still, to this day, it gives you goosebumps.
So it does, superb.
So when you came back to the club, Jack Meets Jack.
We did that. Yeah, Tommy arranged that. Was good.
How is Jack as a guy? How is he to interview and sort of what did you think? What did you think of the current group and the current squad?
I did get quite emotional going back because I'm thinking, I was there when the old training ground was there, and you were just waiting in reception with Graham Taylor. It was very old school, and then it modernised when Randy Lerner came in, and there it was. So much excitement at the time because the club were back where they belong in the Premier League. You've got Local Boy, you've got Dean Smith. They just worked perfectly at the time, and his love of it, and he appreciated how difficult it had been for the fans. And he just couldn't wait to get going, and it was surreal seeing him. I knew him as a boy, dazzling skills in the youth games, thinking he could be a player. Obviously, when I was there the first time, he did help them to a final, didn't he? And
man of the match against Liverpool.
That was that was the one win I think for Villa at Wembley that I've covered with the club, I was impressed with the new setup, and it was a tough season that season.
Yeah.
The great behind closed doors escape, wasn't it? Trezeguet.
Yeah.
Well, a Villa legend, you have to say, in a short time.
Absolutely.
There, for what he achieved, and I think we had that surreal.
Took us to a cup final and kept us up.
Yeah. I mean, it was. I mean, I've got to say, one of the best games I've done was the 7-2 against Liverpool. Just imagine that with fans.
Yeah.
People say, or they wouldn't have beaten them 7-2, but you don't know.
No,
they
you
might,
don't know.
because there were some deflected goals, there's a bit of fortune. They might. You do get the odd strange result. And also, one of the best games I have to say was Chelsea when some fans came back, because that had been difficult. So even though it was only 10,000, Villa won, and Chelsea won the Champions League, didn't they? The next week. That was great. So there've been some really, and obviously, recently with the long-awaited league win over Manchester United at Villa Park with Unai Emery coming in, so that brought it forward. So even since coming back, there's still been some. Also, I quite enjoyed helping keep some of the fans connected in the pandemic. We did a few Q&As with ex-players, with the likes of Lee and Hendry and Darius, and that, which was great, because it was really nice for them to be able to do that, because it was a very difficult time for all of us, and obviously I was thinking, well, what's going to happen to me with football stopping, and obviously a lot of events and things. So
that's quite a unique position, because I think from the people that I sort of know, the only people that I knew that were going to football matches then were referees that I know.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And even they were like, this is weird, because they had to travel on their own. They literally were getting changed, sort of away from the other referees. The first time they chat to them was in the tunnel going onto the pitch, and they said, this is weird. So from a commentator's perspective, that COVID behind closed doors year and a half, how weird was that for you in an empty ground to be sort of trying to pick the bones out of football matches?
In a couple of ways, I think I was well prepared for that. And you know why? It's because if you think about it, I was really used to seeing Villa empty. Because obviously I'd worked in the media department for so many years on the radio station, and our base wasn't at Bodymore, although we spent a lot of time there, to and fro, getting the material with the players. But I was based with the rest of the staff, the ticket office staff and the catering, all that, at Villa Park.
Right.
So I was used to, and actually it's got a special sort of mystery, eerie feel when it is quiet.
It's a bit cavernous.
It is, that's a good word. And so I was sort of prepared for that. And also, having covered so many youth and reserve games, when you don't get many people there, I was still able to convey the drama, even though you didn't have the natural lift of the buzz that the big crowd gives you. And I mean, that it's got me into trouble over the years, actually, doing reserve games, getting excited, and the managers can hear you. So it's we've been in that position at White Hart Lane, even with fans. I remember saying to Gary Shaw, what do you think David would have told him at half time, Gary? And he goes, well, Jack, why don't you ask him? He's sat there. Because when you're so close to them. So that was with fans in. But these situations, that's why when I did the games, I was with Tony Daly or Ian Taylor, Brian Little. I think Alan Hutton did a couple of games, and Miller Yedinat. We were actually behind a screen, behind the goal, in the bottom tier of the north stand. Is it where the gas lamp is now?
No, it's the other end. That's the gas lamps behind the whole end, isn't it?
I think it's... Anyway, we were behind the north stand.
Yes.
And I was relieved about that, because it meant that when we got excited, I've got a loud voice. Tony Morley always used to say that. Before I worked with him, he had to go to the West Brom press officer covering a game. Then he goes, who's this bloke? He's too loud. So and I ended up working with Tony for 15 years. He's one of the best people I know. But and we had a great relationship. But it's what was I saying there? I lost my thread. But I was saying about
during COVID and
during COVID and ex-players, and I was pleased that we were behind a screen, because obviously they couldn't hear me, because it would have been a bit weird, wouldn't it? Because I've got I'm a singer, so I've got a classical background and training, so I do use so I'm probably louder than
using your diaphragm.
Yeah, exactly. Because with the mic, everyone sounds the same pitch, don't they, on the radio, on the CD? But obviously I had a naturally very loud voice anyway, so I was actually pleased I was behind the screen. So I was getting just as excited as I normally would at a 7-2, even though there was no one there. But it was strange, because it just didn't feel right.
So are there any sort of stories from your career, Jack, that stand out for you as being a moment that you'll never forget for all the right reasons?
All the right reasons.
And then anything from the wrong reasons as well.
Oh, crikey, right, okay. Well, I was thinking of some O'Neill stories, but we've obviously mentioned the interview when that was really when I started to think, I've really got a good connection with this manager, so I can really get behind the scenes and experience what goes on, and that's a sort of unique situation and opportunity. And he would then invite us over to Marbella on a mid-season break, and I remember that one particularly because he'd heard I was a bit of a singer, and so I did the karaoke. Okay. And I did Your Song by Elton John, and the trouble is that there's a guy who's clearly was a bit of a karaoke king. Has done it. He felt like he was just in the bar all the time when we were there, but he just sung it. So I really put myself under pressure. Yeah. And I started, and I could hear Robbo going, I didn't realise we brought Ali Jones on the trip. And I thought, God, this is going to be hard now. And he said to the other, I hear him when I'm in the chorus of Your Song, and he's going, you were ahead on points, mate. So the other guy at the bar. And then Martin said to all of them, he said, guys, what you need to do is go boo him when he comes off. Go boo, and he didn't try to tell him how to boo. He said, go boo, boo. So I go. Everyone else loved it, by the way. And I got a standing ovation over there. And then these miserable kids booing in the corner. But then that was the type of thing. And when I talk about getting in, behind the scenes, and he invited us to stay in the hotel before the League Cup final, which not everyone would have had the chance to do a bit of filming. I interviewed him the night before. I remember I used the line, I think I used a line from Gladiator. I said something like, Martin, as Russell Crowe says in Gladiator, what we do in life echoes in eternity. So are you going to take your chance? And he thought, it's a good one. But I don't think he was probably in the mood for those. He was focused on the game. It didn't work out in the end. We ended up, actually, I think, he had someone he'd given tickets to who'd helped his wife who'd been ill. So was in the bar the night before, and me and Paul and Bobby went over and had a chat with him about. But I think what he wanted to do was he'd done his preparation, he got them ready. He just wanted to switch off. So we just talked to him about films, about his interest in the legal profession, anything but than football, really. And so it was that I particularly enjoyed, and obviously all the trips that went with it. And I mentioned the Boring to Boring and the journey to Germany when we went over under Lambert, and we went to Ron Vlaar's house where he grew up, and met his sister and his mum, went to the club that he played for, and one of the coaches, and that type of thing. Ron couldn't believe that we'd gone the effort to do that. We met the Dutch Supporters Club and reenacted the famous European Cup winning goal outside the new Feyenoord Stadium, which is a bit surreal to do that. And it was just us trying to think outside the box and do something a bit different. I would say just sort of travelling the depths of the country, and also going abroad, and
that's been your best.
But also, it's hard to pick out one moment. But I think, as I've said, the initial stages of your career are so special. When you're thinking, even when I went in to do the Football League highlights for the first time, I'm thinking, God, am I going to be able to do this? And it's natural to have a bit of self-doubt, isn't it? And you've got 6 games to cover, teams you don't really know, and suddenly the footage comes in, you've got the deadline to beat. You've got to add the words to the pictures rather, and make it interesting and entertaining. So even that,
do you only get one go at
that? You can do more than one take when you're in there, but the time is of the essence, so you can't afford to take too long. So that becomes difficult, and sometimes things change at the last minute with the games you're covering. I think it's like anything that's worth doing is a challenge, and I'd never want to just go through the motions. And also, I did find towards the end of my main spell with Villa professionally, I was going home and away to all the games, and I was almost taking it for granted a bit. And I was thinking, I was going to all these big sets, and they're great. So then when it's taken away and you go back, it's more special then. So that's why I do like going back, because you could do this job just without not going to a game. Because often now commentary is done from tube, they're done from feeds, which is okay, that's how it's gone. But I've had the experience of doing it, And I'd love, and it's nice to think that younger people who want to get into it get that chance now, and that's what I like seeing.
It's always better in the ground, isn't it? I mean,
you
get empathy for the game as well.
You do. Yeah, I never lie. I never say I am at a game when I'm not, but equally, I never say I'm not. I never say I'm not there, even though I'm off tube. And sometimes pundits make that mistake. I think, don't say that, because we're trying to give the impression we're there.
So we always finish our podcast with 10 questions.
Oh dear, right.
So the first 5 are quick fire.
I'm sorry if I haven't answered them all succinctly as you wanted. I was always going to go off at tangents. I just remember things.
Some really interesting stuff. Like I've actually really enjoyed this last hour or so. So we finish with the 5 quick fires, and to be fair, you've answered one, but I've got another in my head. Oh, yeah. And then we've got our 5 couple of pints generic questions that we ask to every guest. Okay. So the first 5 are sort of, very much about yourself, and I've thought about. First one is what's your dream game to commentate on?
My dream game that I have commentated on, or that
you could have commentated on it already, or it could be one that you haven't done that you want to do.
That is. I think that's more the question, isn't it? Because I've talked about probably the one I enjoyed most from Villa. That would have been when they beat Blackburn 6-4 in the League Cup semi-final. What would be my dream commentary? I mean, I've done an FA. Maybe it would be nice to do a cup final with Villa that they actually win. Yeah. that would be nice. To do it from a club point of view. Yeah. As a neutral, what would I want to do? I mean, listen, I have covered international football. I did a game at Villa Park. Yep. 0-0 draw it was. I think it played Holland and Sven. Sven was manager. I interviewed him before, and that was a real career highlight. He says, yes, it was freezing when I was first up in Villa Park, I think. They played the national hymn. But again, I can't do his accent either, can I? But dream game to commentate on. How about Villa Wednesday?
That's a great
maybe Villa versus Wednesday in a cup final, because I can't lose, can I?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there'll be something that you'll be like, this is painful one way or another.
Yeah, maybe, because I did Villa Wednesday. It was a dummy run before the Villa radio started, and Wednesday won the game. I think it was the last 16 match. Right. And there I am, as more of a Wednesday man than Villa at the time, and I'm thinking, but I played the party line, don't worry, I pretended to be upset. I remember Steve Stone after the game, he called the performance embarrassing. I wouldn't go that far. But it was... maybe I think Villa
Wednesday.
Villa went, but
you can do a World Cup final. Yeah, I'm offering you a World Cup final as well.
I'd take a World Cup. Villa in the Champions League final, maybe.
I'll take that.
Wednesday, I'm going to get in the Champions League final. How about can I have 2? A Wednesday winning the FA Cup and Villa winning the Champions League. How about
that? I'll take that. 100%. I'll take that. Either any European competition. I'd like a second start. Favourite football stadium.
Again, can I have 2?
Hillsborough and Villa Park.
Well, that's what I'm probably going to say, isn't it? Growing up, obviously, that had a magic to it.
They're 2 great grounds.
2 traditional grounds. Yeah. Of the modern ones, I really like the Emirates. Yeah. I think that's proper modern stadium. It's got everything. Bobby Thompson nearly got us chucked out once with his passionate co-commentary, but we just about survived it. Favourite. I'm just trying to think any of the smaller grounds that has had a surprisingly good atmosphere. I quite like Portman Road.
Okay.
It's got I quite like that, but I'd have to say Villa Park Hillsborough for obvious reasons.
keeping the party line. I can't fault that. You mentioned there almost getting chucked out the Emirates. Have you ever seen as an issue when you've been commentating in an away ground and Villa have scored, inevitably a late equaliser or winner?
I'd say about Bobby Thompson, he really got into Wenger saying, "Stop whinging, Wenger!" and the stewards are coming. But they realise he's just like your friendly uncle on a day out. And actually of his era when Peter McParlin would, because he's always done he always used to do the Southern games with me because he was He lives. I don't know whether he still lives in Bournemouth, but he used to. And so he'd do all the Southern games, and we did Charlton once, and there was a very. I think Villa might have scored or had a good chance, and we were getting really excited, and he quite in close amongst the fans there, and then Charlton scored, and then a guy comes up, and he clearly dodged the steward, came up, and he goes, 1-0, put that on your effing radio. I'm thinking, yeah, all right, with me, A, it's going live, and B, Peter McParland, this guy's a legend in his 60s or 70s as he was at the time. He doesn't need that. So yeah, I've wound up plenty. But then some do it in a nice way. Fulham, you're right in amongst it.
Yeah.
I said something about Ashley Young having dancing feet.
Yeah.
And he danced his way into the area. And then this guy took issue with it, and he kept on every time he had the ball. Here he is with his dancing feet. Get him on Strictly. and that's just nice, and I like that.
Yeah.
So if people take it in the right spirits, it's fine. But sometimes, as you know, fans can get a bit confused.
It's a tribal sport, isn't it?
Yeah, when I play cricket, I like to support my teammates, but some opposing batsmen think that's sledgy against them. Yeah. All I'm doing is being encouraging to my side, as I have done with Villa. But yeah, I've wound up plenty of. That's why I probably prefer doing the home games. You're a bit safer. Yeah.
So we've already mentioned the late great Nigel Pearson, obviously a great football commentator, but also known for lending his voice to Speedway and darts. Yeah. Probably darts was the one that he was most famous for in a lot of ways. If you were to commentate on another sport that wasn't football, what would it be?
Well, actually, Nigel, I first met him at Speedway when at Oleton Stadium in Sheffield when he was doing the announcing, and I was doing a feature. But it would have to be golf. I mean, I've got a massive love of golf.
Yep.
I've mentioned probably more than once my hole-in-one, like 3-wood over the water on the 12th, and I saw it go in. It was brilliant. I've had 3. Can you believe that? On all on Ryder Cup courses, because Lindgren had staged it in 57 when it was Britain and Ireland versus USA, and obviously one at the Belfry. But yeah, I mean, I've mentioned Peter Allis. Yeah, I love his style. I love the way he put it across, and. I just think you've got to do it a different way, haven't you? I always like to think when I've done the youth and reserve games, I did it a bit more like that, like a test match special cricket. Because it does mean as much in a way to the young players, but it's not as significant.
It's not first team game.
Yeah, the results aren't so you can do it with a bit more humour. Yeah. And obviously I've got the experience of playing, but it's and cricket would be the other one, because I've always played cricket to a reasonably good level as well. Very different discipline to football. So it'd be golf.
I was going to say that's quite interesting, because I'm not sure if you've seen Live Golf. Arlo White. Arlo White obviously does a lot of the. He does all the commentary on Live Golf, and I find it weird watching a football commentator
do it, because he can't be as breathless.
I like Arlo, but I don't think that golf suits him, because he commentates on someone taking a 30-foot putt
as if it's a penalty. It's not the same.
And you're like, mate, come on.
The reason it's not the same is you have more than one putting around, don't you?
Of course you do.
I
think I know where you're going to go with this one, but favourite sport to play? That'd be golf as well.
It would be golf or cricket.
Okay.
Golf, I think with cricket, if you're a batsman, which I was, you get a good ball, you hit a bad shot, it's a long day. I love the banter of the fielding, it's great. But obviously I didn't bowl, only in an emergency. That's whereas golf, you get another chance, don't you? If you hit a bad shot, you knock it in the water, whatever, you miss a putt, you can recover on that shot. That hasn't got the team out. Table tennis is another sport I absolutely love. We had a table at Bodymore, which we sometimes played on. So
Did you beat anyone notable?
Well, I had a game with Martin O'Neill. I've got some footage somewhere that I've never used. But he was finding it difficult to get past my defences, should we say. So that might get an airing at some point.
Brilliant. So these 5 questions are just our generic questions we ask everyone.
Right.
What's the top bit of advice you could give anyone? And it could be about anything.
It could be about anything.
About anything. What advice
can I use a sort of cliched phrase?
Yeah, of course.
I would say treat other people as you would be treated yourself.
Yep.
And I just think that for any walk of life, whatever you're doing, you should remember that, because I see it all the time in the media and in football particularly, where people are only nice to people who they think can help them, and the hierarchical stuff. I speak the same to a chairman as I do to someone who's sweeping the floor, and I'm not saying sweeping the floor isn't a valuable job. It is. It's as valuable as it, and that's why I'm saying that, and that's why Paul was so great, Faulkner, as a chief exec, because he valued what everyone did, and I would say that in life. Yeah.
Brilliant. If you could only do the same thing every day forever, like a Groundhog Day scenario, what would you do? What would your day look like?
Oh, the whole day. Right, I'd probably have a lie in. I'm more of a night owl than a morning person. How I did the villain breakfast show and the TFM one on the Sport for so long, I don't know. But yeah, I'm not a morning person. I mean, there would definitely. Actually, I might have an early morning round of golf. I think to get you going, and then it sets you up for it means you don't waste the day, doesn't it? I'd do that. I'd probably spend some time with family. Have a nice meal with family, which is so important. Big film fan, love a bit of musical theatre. So I might do that in the afternoon, and then I might have to get in some sort of football, whether I'd
under the lights of half second kick.
Yeah, whether I used to play six-a-side at uni, so whether I could do that and play around a golf at my age now, not that I'm old, but might be a struggle. So yeah, there'd be definitely some
football
football involved. Yeah.
Brilliant. I think you've said this already, but what's your go-to karaoke song, and what's
I don't. I'm not really a karaoke man. Purely, but that doesn't scar me, what happened on the tour. But because I do perform sort of semi-professionally and with a very very decent standard. I know that sounds a bit arrogant, doesn't it? But I don't mean it to. I just think I'm not. I end up. I think the problem with karaoke, I end up going thinking I've got to really sing it properly, and thinking, whereas actually you're just doing it as a laugh, aren't you?
Yeah.
But what would I pick? I might go for a bit of Back for Good. Take that.
Okay.
Although it's hard to do. The verse is fine, but the back chorus. I might have to go and opt it down. But I'm a big fan of that song. I probably would go Back for Good. Yeah.
Brilliant. And finally, this is the question which sort of the podcast was designed around, and then the process was. 3 people, dead or alive, that you would go for a couple of pints with.
Oh wow, that is. Have I met them, or
it could be any 3 people? If I said to you, right, Jack, I'm gonna throw some money at a night out for you to go and have the best night out you can. 3 people to be with you. Who do you fancy having a couple of pints with?
Right, well, I've got to go with Lottie, haven't I?
I'd say so, yeah.
I'd definitely go with him.
He'd have some great stories,
he would have
sure.
some brilliant stories. Who can I think of from the world of music? Oh, that is so hard.
Is that how you split it, football, music?
Maybe, but obviously I'm a big golf fan, as you know. So I think I might go. Would I go with? I'd probably go with Nick Faldo. I think of Marty and Nick Faldo.
Yeah, I like that.
Because, he won 6 majors, didn't he? And he's got a great story.
He's got a good personality as well.
He has got a good personality. And then, and a singer. How about Dolly Parton?
That's left field.
Is that a bit random? That is a bit random.
That was left
I don't know
field.
how that's come into my head, but I feel like it has to have a musical element.
No, that would be. I imagine that would be a lot of fun that night out. I'm not sure. I mean, Nick Faldo would be like, "How's this happened?"
Well, I could do a duet of "I Will Always Love You," but obviously I wouldn't be singing that to Motti, even though I respect his work or Nick for his golf. But I think I'm sure we'd have lots to discuss.
No, brilliant, Jack. It's been fantastic. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and we wish you well.
Absolute pleasure, and to you.
Top man, thank you.
Top man.
Cheers, pal.
Cheers. Good to see you.